Okay.
Good morning.
Well, welcome to Sibling Scribbles. My name is Johnny.
And my name is Marin.
And
we have been talking for like an hour and a half already.
We have been in heated debate, and we just forgot to record. We deeply apologize.
Yes.
It's actually probably for the best that we did do most of it, because a lot of it is spoilers for Bales.
Yeah. Also, you should never see us disagree, because you can never go to bed angry at anyone ever.
What?
And
No.
as I'm going to bed momentarily. Today, we're going to be talking about birds.
I don't know how I got roped into this episode.
You chose this episode.
I did not.
You're like, you'll get back from your trip and you can talk about birds.
Was that? I don't sound like that.
Oh, you talk about birds.
That's me. That's right. There it is. Let's talk about birds. It's bird time.
But more importantly, how to create a world. I think we could probably.
Oh, okay.
Kind of.
So the reason I wanted to do this episode is because we were planning episodes, and I said we need to have episodes about cross-discipline kind of improvement, right? Right. Cross-discipline. Going into other disciplines actually improves storytelling, because you understand things better for your stories. Right. Hayao Miyazaki clearly knows a lot about freaking planes, right? So his movies are heightened by his understanding of planes.
Yeah, it's like an Elder Uchtdorf talk.
Yes, it is. Airplane time, baby.
They'd really get along.
Wouldn't you know it? Airplanes, right? Like, but that's kind of the point, though, is that when you have a lot of knowledge about a variety of things, it improves your writing.
Right.
I went to Spain a few months ago, and it definitely kind of just blossomed. Ideas blossomed in my mind. It was beautiful stuff. And you just came back from Kenya.
Woo!
Woo-woo.
So, a couple of months ago, actually no, last year, I met this really cool friend, and her name is Audrey. We were on a study abroad together, and we were in New Zealand, and she's a huge birder, like very into ornithology, wants that to be part of her career. And I made fun of her for it because it's fun to make fun of people, especially when they're a nerd. So, but then she was like, okay, take the class with me because I'm TAing it. It's a piece of cake and we can hang out and look at birds. I'm like, sure, why not? So, let me just say, birding becomes a lot cooler when you have binoculars or a camera and you can actually see.
Right. Otherwise, you're like brown bird, brown bird.
Blackbird, brown bird.
Blackbird again. Okay.
I've got a lot of variety today. But once you can see them and you start learning their names, you're like, oh, this is pretty exciting, actually. And so I went on a trip, like a birding trip for the class, to South Utah, and you just like get as many birds as you possibly can, because your bird count, like your list, is part of your final grade for the class. So I went and I was texting my dad. I'm like, hey Pops, you travel, let's like go birding in some country.
I don't know if you were old enough for Dad's birding phase.
I do remember it. I do.
Dad had it was the Wrigley, right? It was the book that you have.
Sibley.
Right, Sibley. There we go. He had the Sibley book for Iowa, right, where we lived at the time.
Oh, I should probably put my books out.
Yeah, go get him. I'll talk about Dad's birding phase. Embarrassing. Right? He had, it was essentially a little Pokedex, right? I remember being a kid and being really excited about how in our glove compartment we suddenly had all these Pokedexes about birds. Here, show the camera, show the nice people at home. And these books are just like every single, don't do the hand thing. It is not, get out of the way, get out of the shot. Get out of the shot. The bird books are really, really cool because every single page is just tons of information about the birds, right? They just go in deep detail about them.
It is a Pokédex.
It is a Pokédex on how to spot and how to kind of keep track of these birds. And so I remember thinking it was really neat because I had a cool new book that talked about birds for like a week. That was cool. But then for months and months afterward, Dad would stop on the side of the road.
While we're driving.
Right, while we were driving somewhere, right? We had places to be. We had appointments, and Dad would stop everything he was doing and turn off the car and walk outside and just in the middle of nowhere, pull out his bird book and look through binoculars and just go, yeah. He saw them birds. He saw them birds.
Yeah.
He loved it. And so I'm sure that when you told him that this hobby of his arose from its stinking bird grave.
My time has come. If you will, a phoenix from the ashes.
So of course he said, yes, let's do it.
I was thinking like, oh, we could go to like Mexico or something.
Sure.
Something, pretty close. And he was like, okay, I'm thinking Indonesia, India, how about Uganda, Kenya? Like, what you feeling? And I was like, okay.
All right.
So we started doing research and we decided that Kenya would be the best place because right now it's actually not birding season because usually you go birding for migration. But because Kenya has so many birds that we saw 327 different species.
Ugh.
Yeah.
On the not birding season time.
On the not birding season time. And that's ridiculous. Just like for perspective, Utah has 240 species around there.
Maximum.
Max. Year round. That's it. Like, that's what you got, babe. And we saw that many in 7 days. So
that's crazy.
Yeah. So
That's
it was
really crazy.
It was so cool. We had a great time. Thompson and Mom came as well. And
you told me a statistic that kind of, sorry to interrupt, but
fine.
You told me a statistic that like birding is one of the biggest, what is it? Yeah.
One of the most outdoor
like sports, like activities. It's one of the biggest forms of outdoor recreation.
That's
in the
the
world.
phrasing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's number one.
It's number one.
Over like hiking.
Yeah. Like birding which is nuts, right? I had no idea that birding was such a big deal. I thought like fishing would beat out birding.
Right.
Like people talk about fishing a lot, but like birding is a massive, massive industry.
Yeah, and just like with people going and traveling places to go birding, one, but then also buying things. So, which is crazy because there isn't like birding merch.
Right.
Like, I mean, you see the shirts with, like the blue-footed boobies and, boobie.
Clever, very clever.
Or the two like little birds and says tits, because tits is the type of bird.
Yeah,
you're like,
very
oh wow,
clever.
that's so good, and I wish I had that shirt. That's funny, but I do go to a religious institute, so I cannot. In fact.
Right, but it is okay for you to have a shirt that says "I'm a cougar," right on it.
Yeah.
Religious institute, double standard, maybe.
Maybe, or the people who have the "I'm a virgin."
Oh, from like a
hoodies.
virgin.
No.
What?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We're gonna tangent really quick.
It might have different phrasing than that. It's like oh no, it's the virginity rocks. That's what it is. Or the I Love Mormon Girls shirts. Ooh. Gives me the willis.
I just experienced bowel movement. That is
gross. And John, we're gonna have a technical difficulty pause.
Just don't say any cringy T-shirts around me. I can't either wear. But Marin's T-shirts are my favorite. The friggin' we have Dr. Teeth over here today.
It's the Muppets
from the Muppets,
today.
the Muppets band. My favorite shirt of yours is the "I do not think, therefore I do not am."
It has a raccoon
and
on
a
it.
big raccoon on it. That is Big Igor energy. That is a character from my book.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I also have a shirt that says Brandon Sanderson doesn't exist, and
yes,
you can get said shirt. It's very nice, very comfortable.
Yeah, no, just like email us or something. Yeah. SiblingScribblesPod@gmail.com. Just straight up like email it and we will send it to you.
Yeah, we've actually been stopped and been like, oh my gosh, I love your shirt. And I was like, you can buy it.
We really need to set up like an Etsy or something.
Yeah, probably.
So you went.
So we flew to Kenya. It took like 30 hours of travel to get there, which is insane. I think it took my parents like a 3-hour flight or 4-hour flight. And they're like, man, we're just so tired from travel. I'm like, shut up. Whatever.
I saw pictures of mom just like playing in the jungle, just like, hee hee, hooray, having a good time. I was like, I wish that I was frolicking in the Kenyan jungles.
The thing is that when you think of Africa, TM, you think of like Lion King, like the savannah. There's like so many other ecosystems there. Like we were walking through a forest that looked like the exact forest that was behind the Purple Park in Texas.
Really?
Exact.
We played at that park like every week, like all the time.
Yeah, but there was this little forest behind it. But it's like, it was weird because I recognized it, but I was in Kenya.
That's so weird.
It was really weird. This is the Sokoke forest.
That's so weird. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. So in terms of like world building and storytelling, what kind of stuff really stood out to you in this brand new biome, right? You were, in New York City, you've seen one building, you've seen all the sewer rats, right? Like
Right. One thing that we really learned on it is that we're just going to use Kenya as an example. In Kenya, there are a few different types of ecosystems. Let's say 5, right? One of them is actually like up in the mountains, and it's like super foggy and cold, and it was the weirdest thing. I feel like I was in Legend of Zelda. I'm like, this is weird.
That's weird.
Cut to what's her face? Rachel Zegler. Weird. We learned that if you went to the same biome, the same birds would be there. Mm-hmm. And then in certain forests, only one, like there were animals, like in like species of birds that only lived in that forest and nowhere else in the entire world. That's called an endemic species.
Weird. Nerd.
And I was like, that's very interesting, because I feel like a lot of times when people are creating worlds, it's just like the same thing. You're like, oh, this is an enchanted forest. There's mushrooms and moss.
And the blue fox.
It's blue.
It's a fox.
It's a shiny Pokemon.
It doesn't really do anything different.
It's just blue. It's got 2 tails or something.
Yeah.
But I was like, when it comes to world building, there's so many other details that you could add. Mm-hmm. Like in Breath of the Wild, there are bird sounds in the trees, birds that you can't find.
Right.
And they're real birds. And you're like, whoa.
Oh, I thought you were going in a different direction. Are you upset that you can't find the birds?
I mean, that too. I mean, there are birds you can see, but there's like the sounds of like a yellow warbler or something like that. And I'm like, that's so cute. I know that one.
Do you really? Do you recognize the bird calls?
A couple. I don't know. Not all of them.
Wait a minute. There's different bird calls in that game?
Uh-huh.
That's so sick.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Because I'm not a birder. I would have never known. Wait, yeah. I thought they were just, random,
like, that's morning bird sound.
Yeah. No, they had like they've like multiple types of bird calls.
Yeah.
That's so sick.
It's really cool.
What a cool game.
Yeah. And so I think I kind of like Pokemon, right?
Right.
Where they have like the snow Pokemon. They live in the snow. The fire Pokemon. They live in the volcano.
The rat Pokemon. It lives at home. It lives really close. That's pretty much it actually too.
Yeah.
It's a little rat.
The bird Pokemon. Yeah, so I was like, okay, but how cool would it be? You've seen like fan art and stuff for this, but it's like, how cool would it be if there was like a Pidgeot? Is that what it's called? Pidgeot?
Oh yeah, you got it.
Yeah. And sorry, it just doesn't sound like a real word. The different kinds that lived in different regions.
They do have that. Did you not know that? They have regional forms now.
That's cool.
Yeah, so now, so yeah, like if you look up Alolan, Alolan, put an N at the end. No, yeah, there we go. Regional variants. Yeah, Alolan. Click on that one there.
Oh, cute.
Alolan Vulpix is my favorite.
Oh, I have
right?
seen these actually.
Yeah, and they've started doing this in all the new regions, and I'm a big fan of it. I think that Pokemon, frankly, if they really wanted to, they never had to design another Pokemon in their lives. They could have stuck with the 151 or the first 200 and just remixed them over and over and over again. They didn't even need to change their typing. They could have just like remixed the coloring of them. Right. And Pokemon they could have just kept doing that. I know that in some regions there are Pokemon that only exist on like the east or west coast of the region. So like there's like a there's like a Gastrodon East Coast and it's pink, and Gastrodon West Coast and it's blue, right? And like there's that kind of
But like I think it could be taken like a whole step more, you know?
Okay.
Just because birds have evolved for, ever. I mean, they were created on the 5th day, and so
they've had a few days.
They've had a few days to be pretty evolved, and there's so much variation in them. It's astounding, and like some of them really blend in, and you're like, oh, that's how you're not extinct. And other ones, you're like, how are you not? Because you really stand out.
Like, how did you outlive Dodo? Right? Like, what an
oh my gosh. Poor Dodo.
Rip Dodo.
R.I.P.
So I guess my question is for people who want to be world building, and they, maybe they don't need to come up with 300 bird species, right? That's a bit.
No.
That's too much.
I mean, you're not designing a whole country.
No, well, some people are trying to, but they're not designing a book specifically about birders in a fantasy world, right?
Yeah, right.
So my question is that if they do want to kind of understand this, how would you research birding? How would you research birds, right? What's the right way to kind of like figure out what kind of birds you're going to have in your book or in your movie or in your whatever?
You just have to think of an ecosystem, So it's like if you're building, let's say, a fantasy forest, right?
Sure.
You just have to figure out what are the biggest predators that your adventurer are going to fight. And don't just have them be like the same old.
It's a blue tiger.
Like, oh, wow, how cool. Or I'm trying to think of a fantasy creature. All I can think of is like a panther. Not a fantasy creature.
The only ones I've got are Brandon Sanderson fantasy creatures.
Oh.
Sorry, it's all I've been reading. Rancor from Star Wars, the big creature in Jabba's palace. I'm currently reading a Star Wars book, and Rancors are the apex predators.
Or like a lionel or something.
Sure, yeah, good example.
Yeah. So it's like if you have that, then what's it going to eat? And then what's that thing going to eat? And what's that thing going to eat? And what's that going to eat? And then you can like make this pretty interesting thing that's
food chain.
Yeah. like a chain. Because they eat the other links.
And then it kind of sounds like you can build varieties of those different chain links, right? So you can say like, okay, these guys eat birds, and now I'm going to build lots of different birds that have adapted different ways to avoid the one above it, and then bugs, and now I'm going to develop.
Right.
If these birds have adapted this way to beat the predator, then these bugs have developed this way to beat the birds that have adapted.
Does our character interact with these bugs? Are they going to get malaria? Are there different kinds of fruits and interesting kind of nuts and berries? If so, then you're going to have birds that have adapted to eat them as well,
and bugs that have adapted to eat them,
right?
And predators that completely avoid them, and like that's really, really fun.
But I've never seen that before. I'm like, I think that would be cool.
Well, I think a lot of stories tend to. I mean, well, first of all, it's the cross discipline, right? We are trying to kind of explain here that knowing about this stuff, knowing about ecology, actually heightens the experience. I hate to talk about Brandon, but we're going to talk about Brandon for a second. I feel like Brandon. No, you don't need to close he does not exist. Aaron's pointing to the Brandon Sanderson doesn't exist sticker. Everyone's very impressed with his world building. And sometimes I am too. I really, really am. But the more that we've talked about this, the more I feel like his animals and his world work really, really well on paper. But I don't really see the food chain for some of these things, right? I don't really see like that aspect is kind of missing, right? Like bugs are just kremlings, and they're all one type of, they're just kremlings. There's nothing really special about them.
It sounds like a type of coin.
Yeah. Or
I haven't read the books.
no, you're not entirely wrong. Or like white spines. I really don't understand, like, what are white spines hunting? What are white spines eating besides people, right? Like it feels like all these ideas like look like a very fleshed out world.
Right.
But if I actually look at it for too long, I'm going to be like, okay.
These things only interact with people. We never see them ever interact with each other.
Right. The web is only functional around the characters, not functional within itself.
Right.
It sometimes feels that way.
Yeah. Which is kind of, I don't know, disheartening a little bit sometimes, because you read a story about these people who are out in nature. They're like rangers, or they're training for something or something like that. And they never really interact with anything that doesn't just interact with them.
Right.
Like they're never walking in on a situation where there's something else happening, not about them.
Yeah. Nature is like happening while we're not around, and I kind of like the idea of that, right? That like nature is sometimes you are just going to stumble into something that has nothing to do with you, right?
Right.
You're not being hunted. You're not, things are happening, and you don't need to, you don't need to involve yourself, but people do.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, there's only so much of a place for this, I think, because, I mean, you can't just be spending all of this time talking about...
Right. Being fantasy David Attenborough, right?
Right. I mean, as much as that would be cool.
Honestly, pretty rad.
That's why I kind of like Delicious in Dungeons.
What a friggin' poll. I got a high five for that. That's great. That is so great. Yeah, go ahead.
Because if you haven't seen it, it's a Netflix show. It's an anime, but it's really wholesome and it's cute. And it's a cooking show, basically, that is set in this Dungeons and Dragons world. And they are trying to eat as they're going through this dungeon because they didn't have enough money to buy food to go through the dungeon.
So they have to hunt monsters, which are everyone knows that if you eat monsters, it's going to give you horrible,
I get a rash.
Right. It's gonna give you food poisoning. But it turns out that people are just not cooking monsters correctly, right? And so these characters are kind of discovering and figuring out how to.
Do I have him on here too?
Cook.
I do.
You do, yeah. You have Senshi on there. And this dungeon, as they go deeper and deeper into the layers, they discover more and more about the monsters and the monsters ecosystem.
Right. And like that is so cool that at the center of it is the dragon, right?
Right.
The dragon that they're going to kill because it's a D&D story.
Obviously.
But then like what is that eating? And we see that. And what is this eating?
And because the dragon's an apex predator, where is it pushing the next level of apex or the next level of predator?
Right.
And if they're doing that, then what does that push out to the next level? And so like, you don't really think about how the dragon affects the Kelpies, right? Until they start talking about why the Kelpies are the place they are.
Right.
And how the dragon has affected that.
And they're like, why aren't there any, when they're in the lake area, why aren't there any like big or medium bosses? They're like, what? This is weird.
That's right. And then there's actually a giant sea serpent.
So good.
That's right. Oh my gosh, I forgot about that. That actually is the perfect example of a story that like leans into fantasy ecosystems.
Right. And in a way, you're like, I've experienced Dungeons and Dragons. I've played it.
It's pretty rote.
It's a thing. We've all seen Lord of the Rings. Even if you're, not a D&D nerd, like you've seen Lord of the Rings. Like, come on now.
Yeah. So you know D&D.
So you know D&D.
You know it.
So, but like you watch this and it's like you've never played D&D before.
Yeah.
Because they make their complete own world. And it's so fun to experience with them. I'm like, huh.
My favorite part is the way they do mimics. The bugs are...
Oh, right.
In D&D, mimics are actually just kind of this aberration, right? They have like the tongues and the teeth. If you watch the Honor Among Thieves movie, like they are kind of these freakish monsters. But in Delicious in Dungeon, the mimics are crustaceans, right? So they are like hermit crabs, giant hermit crabs that live inside treasure chests.
Right.
And then there are mimic insects that look like coins.
And jewels.
And they will actually go into treasure chests full of, with these mimic crustaceans in them, and eat the mimic crustacean, and then they will become the jewels inside a treasure chest. And I mean, that's so cool.
Like, it's so creative.
It's so cool.
So part of me is like, okay, so we read books and stuff like that, and we're like, they're so creative. Oh my gosh, they made this world. but sometimes I'm like, okay, but how far could you have gone if you were trying to build this like ecosystem at the same time? What if you included ecology? Maybe that's not your strength. Maybe that's something you don't care about, but like, it's kind of cool to think about.
Absolutely. Thinking about like when I went to Spain, I have a big fantasy epic that I eventually want to write. It is my, like, it's the thing that I think is going to be my greatest story. It's the one that I personally am the most passionate about. But I've left it simmering for a really long time because I don't think I'm good enough yet to write it. I just know is the kind of story that requires a much better writer than me. So I'm just going to,
Become that writer.
I'm going to become that writer. Yeah. And so while I was in Spain, I was very inspired. I was very, very inspired, especially by the Spanish landscape. The story was kind of dreamed up while I was on my mission in Spain. So returning there reignited that passion and that excitement for it. And what I didn't really think about until you started talking about it is that Spain also has crazy biomes, really wacky biomes. We were up in the mountains where it was foggy. It was thick. Like, I've never seen fog as thick as pea soup.
Yeah.
But my gosh, we could not see 20 feet in front of us. It was terrifying. It was like a nightmare.
Yeah, we were driving up these like skinny little roads.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Holy crap, it was terrifying. And then, but once we got up there, right, we'd been driving through the plains, right, where people are growing wheat. And it was, some of it was very reminiscent of Utah's desert area, right? La Mancha is very reminiscent of that. But then there's other areas where it's very, very like golden plains, right? These rolling golden plains, nothing like we have in Utah.
Yeah.
And then we get up into the mountains and it's cold and scary and terrifying. But once we're up there, we get up into these verdant like valleys and towns built on the sides of mountains. And until you started talking just now, I was like, I didn't think that I was surrounded by such vibrant and distinct biomes.
Right. And which is so interesting because a lot of times we're like, oh, this is a city story. There's a city.
That is all.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, okay, but what more can it be? Like, how much can we experience? How can they interact with the world? Because even when you're in a city, like, besides like the smells and the whatever, what bugs are there? What birds are there? What rats are there? What's the weather like? And what's the weather like the instant you leave the city?
Right. The cities are not built in a vacuum, right? Cities are built in a biome, right?
Right.
Like a great example is freaking New Orleans, right? New Orleans is like, shouldn't exist.
No, they need to like caution tape off Louisiana. They've been flooded so many times.
New Orleans is below sea level. How do you do that?
Yeah, go live in Wyoming. There's no one there.
Except for the government.
And all of their bird plants.
And all of their
where they develop the birds and distribute them.
Honestly, if one birder made it into the government, they'd be like, let's make some robots. We're going to make some birds.
Otto, she always jokes. Oh, this is Audrey. I call her Otto. She always jokes when people are like, oh, you're a birder, you go on like birding, I was supposed to say quests. That's not true.
No, I mean, kind of.
She goes and she does surveys for like the airport or for the government or anything like that.
Sure.
And so she always jokes around. She's like, actually, there's no such thing as birds. I just go out, change their batteries, send them back out. I'm like, you're funny.
Birds work for the bourgeoisie.
She's so funny.
Well, it's really. Did you know that Pokemon originally was inspired by bug catching? Right, the original creator loved bug catching as a kid, and he loved gachapon machines. Right, the little like put in a quarter and it spits out a little pod. And once you know that, you understand exactly how Pokemon exist. Right.
Wow,
like,
it was literally written by a 7-year-old.
Yeah, actually, he's like, you're gonna go out there and you're gonna throw a gotcha thing at them, and then boom, you have the bug and it fights
That's
for
so
you.
Cute.
It's adorable. It's so adorable.
Oh, that's so cute. But like when you are birding, it is Pokemon.
Yeah.
It's Pokemon in real life. You should have been there to see Thompson and Dad pop up out of the lid of the car and be like, there it is. And then be like, oh, yeah, that's 248. And they like high five. I was like, oh my gosh.
Bonding experience.
Thompson got so into it. He really, and he was like, Marin, it's kind of embarrassing because if my past self could see me now, he'd be so ashamed, but I'm having a good time. I'm like, attaboy.
Yeah. Is the and then there's an app. There's like an app where you log all of the birds you've ever seen, like a Pokédex.
Like a Pokédex. It's called eBird. It's an app created by Cornell. And it's their way of surveying the world just by having people who are interested in birding do their research for them so that they can make sure that no birds are going extinct.
Right. That's brilliant. That's such a smart idea. This is the last thing.
So cool.
Last thing I have to say.
Okay.
Thompson saying that reminds me of me when I met Haley. Haley really 5 years ago for her birthday, we went to the aquarium. And I was just dating her at the time, and I thought, okay, cool. Like, I support you. You love the aquarium. Sure, whatever. I can take a walk today, and then we can make out afterwards. And we went to the aquarium, and it changed my life. It opened up my eyes. I had an amazing time at the aquarium.
That's so cute.
I had no idea I'd have such a good time. It did something in my monkey brain to see nature. Yeah, it was an aquarium nature. It wasn't like real life nature, but it was.
But the Salt Lake City Aquarium's pretty good.
It's excellent. It's excellent. The Loveland Aquarium is so good, and it opened up my eyes to like nature. It made me go, wow, like there's. Like nature's beautiful and incredible, and the cool jellyfish and lobsters and crap. And then we went to the zoo, and it changed my life again. I thought I'm a grown man. I'm not going to enjoy the zoo. I'm not 7. And I went and I saw a tiger roar, and I felt in my soul that I needed to run as fast as possible away from that tiger.
That's so cool. He actually roared?
Yeah. He was just like walking around his enclosure going. It was amazing.
Wow.
It was so cool. It
was a great snarl.
No, thank you. Yeah.
Wow.
I've been working on it to scare Roy. He likes it.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's good.
But I really do encourage, and Thompson probably felt like, okay, why am I so excited about birds? I encourage anybody to we're not even saying go to Spain, go to Kenya, right? Like we did.
No.
Don't
Don't.
Economy's bad right now, okay?
Spend $40, buy yourselves a good pair of binoculars.
Yeah, or
that's it.
Spend $50 and go to the zoo for the day.
Yeah.
Really just spend some time in nature around animals and consider that like the world, right? The world is this massive, beautiful biome that we get to exist in.
So we're not saying to put your sketchbook, close that, or to close your laptop and stop typing. We're not saying that.
We're saying
keep working on your projects.
Field research.
Yes.
We're talking field research.
Instead of on your break scrolling and experiencing the world through a phone, go out and experience the world yourself.
Yeah, and then you can write what you know. Right? Because you know it.
Because you know it.
Know that crap.
but also do your research because you don't really actually know which. Yeah.
But Marin's right. Marin's right. You can get caught in the birding trap. Don't do it. Finish your projects.
It's really fun.
Keep the book open.
Yeah.
Keep your laptop open. Finish your projects. Keep working. But have some fun.
Find inspiration from real life and know the details of real life. Because it's like, yes, you know the details of your own life. I guess this, goes directly with the episode we recorded just a few weeks ago. But like go out, learn the names of things, know what the trees are, know what the bushes are in your area. And all of a sudden you will have such an interest and an inspiration.
Cross-discipline research, right? This is I cannot emphasize it enough. I'm so glad we did this episode. I had a great idea. I did. Me saying we should do a birds episode. That was all me, everybody.
Cut to John at the beginning. Why are we doing this? Marin.
No, this is all me. I remember now. I was really, really clever to come up with this.
And now we're going to torture John, the editor, and we're just gonna flash on some pictures.
No, he's not. John, the editor's not doing this. My name is Johnny.
Oh wow! Look at all these pictures.
We're ending the episode now. My name is Johnny.
And my name is Marin.
You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, hopefully. And you can read our webcomic on chaptercalledbales.com and TikTok.
And TikTok. You should definitely watch my drawing TikToks. Come draw with me.
Yeah. And we will see you next time.
Stay creative.